No forecast is accurate. So that is a strong belief of mine and also just a mathematical truth. We don't actually have any way to predict the future with perfect accuracy. So although supply chain has been around for quite a while, the challenges in supply chain that we face today, I think, are new or at least much bigger than in the past. So my job at American Eagle, I think my title these days is either principal data scientist or senior manager supply chain science or supply chain intelligence. Essentially what I do is build algorithms to solve complex supply chain problems.
What else excites you about the future in terms of, the technologies and things that you're seeing in the field?
Welcome to Supply Chain Optimizers, the show that uncovers the controversial strategies and candid stories of innovators and disruptors from some of the world's largest supply chain operations. Let's cut through the noise and optimize your logistics and supply chain, one bold idea at a time.
How do you refine your job, Gabriella, at American Eagle?
So my job at American Eagle, I think my title these days is either principal data scientist or senior manager supply chain science or supply chain intelligence. It's changed a bunch over the years, but essentially the job function has not changed. So essentially what I do is build algorithms to solve complex supply chain problems. So I kind of sit between supply chain and technology and create algorithms and build those into our technology ecosystem to support supply chain.
Now, the textile industry has been around for, hundreds and hundreds of years, right? Even American Eagle itself is almost 50 years old. So first question there, how do you think about innovation, specifically AI in this industry? And more specifically, as it comes to supply chains, how do you think about that?
So textile industry has been around for a while. Supply chains have been around for a while. I think probably like most industries, the textile and apparel industry, global supply chain has become very complex in recent years. Compared to the past, it looks like that complexity is just going to continue to increase as the global, political world continues to become more complex. And as there's various challenges with the environment and with tax law, tariff law, everything like that. So although supply chain has been around for quite a while, the challenges in supply chain that we face today, I think, are new or at least much bigger than in the past. And I think in supply chain, we are solving kind of a multi-objective optimization where we're trying to minimize cost, we're trying to maximize speed or minimize delivery time, we're trying to maximize quality and also maximize sustainability. And those objectives can be in conflict with each other. So we have to figure out what all the right trade-offs are. And then with the complexity and variability in the global supply chain, it feels like it's always a moving target. So there's always new problems to solve. I would not say that our problem is not having enough work to do. There's always more work to do for us.
You did introduce a concept here around AI and optimization and how those two interplay together. So how do you explain to yourself maybe the difference between AI and optimization and then how those two play together to solve interesting problems?
This is a loaded question, you may not realize. So my background is in AI for supply chain, and in the kind of consulting world I came up through before I started working full-time at American Eagle. This was a very lively debate we had about what is the definition of AI. So we being me and my colleagues in the past kind of consulting world I come from, I think we pretty much aligned that AI is an umbrella term that can include machine learning. It can include traditional statistical models. It can include traditional mathematical optimization, as well as these days, generative AI, things like that. So I wouldn't separate AI and optimization. I think they go hand in hand. But certainly it's a matter of debate, I would say, in my experience.
Yeah, we had, I think your colleague, Michael Watson, a few weeks ago in the podcast here. And
that's exactly who I'm mentioning. Yeah.
He did have
the guy who says it's an umbrella term. Yeah, exactly.
Exactly that, right? Where he, separates the fields and says, well, there's specializations for both, and you kind of like solve problems the way you solve problems, and one technique might be better fitted for one type of problem versus another.
Yeah, and I think the art of the science is just figuring out what algorithm is the simplest yet most effective to solve whatever the problem is at hand. You don't want to, employ a neural network to solve something that a simple automation could solve. But at the same time, you do need to know when is the right time to employ a neural network. In some cases, you really do need that. So that's kind of the trick.
Try to avoid the proverbial, to those with a hammer, everything looks like a nail kind of problem.
Precisely. I do feel like these days, generative AI seems to be the hammer, and everyone is really excited about that. And so everything looks like a nail. But there's a lot of great value, I think, still to be had in traditional sort of mathematical optimization, statistical models, machine learning. Still a lot of areas of opportunity for those old guys.
Completely agree. Changing gears here a little bit, there's three big initiatives that American Eagle publicly discloses, right? Or that I read through online. Basically, this shared supply chain platform for other retailers, and mostly in clothing. Even some articles online calling it like a frenemy platform. So yeah, I think Quiet Platforms is the name of it. So I wanted to chat a little bit about that. There's also some, public-facing optimization initiatives, and then there's specifically AI for better inventory placement, right? So let's maybe start with this, shared supply chain platform, Quiet. Tell me what that is about.
Yeah, absolutely. So American Eagle Outfitters owns and operates Quiet Platforms, which is a shared logistics platform. So essentially the offering that we have to smaller brands, mostly apparel retail, but some other, cosmetics, health and beauty type brands, as well as footwear and a couple of other industries, we offer the ability to jumpstart their supply chain, jumpstart their logistics by taking advantage of the volume and scale that we have as a much larger retailer at American Eagle. And so they can share our fulfillment and delivery resources, but also as well as some of our intelligence. So we've developed a lot of algorithms to help with optimizing network design, inventory placement, things like that, which we offer to the Quiet clients as well, which are capabilities that brands that are just starting out or are smaller direct-to-consumer brands likely don't already have developed on their own. So that's kind of what we get to offer them.
It's a fascinating business model, right? It's just basically a traditional retailer, American Eagle Outfitters, really playing into technology, optimization, AI, and building this as a service for other smaller retailers, right? And maybe I also saw you wrote a recently published a white paper on what it is that it does, right? That Quiet Platforms actually does. And so it's a collection by my own reading. It's a collection of 4 apps, right? A forecasting app, an assortment app, a dynamic carton routing app, and a transfer app, right? So maybe I want to ask, what are these? What do they do, right? From your point of view as the person building them, right? Let's start with the forecasting app, right? Walk us through it.
So the forecasting app, I can take you through all 4 because they're all very interconnected. They're kind of the building blocks of our inventory optimization, which we use for American Eagle, but then also can offer to the Quiet clients as well. So forecasting and assortment really go hand in hand. This is predicting the demand and the outbound by warehouse location, by SKU, by day or week. And then the assortment app helps us to determine the optimal assortment of products at each node so that we can, essentially what we're trying to do is minimize the delivery costs while not having to buy a ton of inventory to make sure we don't stock out in those locations. So our Quiet network of warehouses is 5 warehouses, and that allows American Eagle and the other brands who are part of the Quiet network to be situated close to their customer base, as well as to their retail stores if they do retail replenishment through the warehouses. But having a complex network of warehouses makes it difficult to spread out that inventory really thin and not stock out, because having the warehouse isn't very close if the inventory isn't in the warehouse. So what the apps do is forecast demand, and then determine what products, for example, are likely to be ordered together so that we don't have split shipments across multiple warehouses. That's essentially the forecast and assortment app. And then the dynamic carton app and inventory rebalance app takes those as inputs and dynamically allocates and rebalances the inventory across the network to, again, ensure we're not stocking out, to make sure we're covering demand for our omni-channel fulfillment.
Right. A lot of questions there, obviously, right? Maybe the first one is, for the layman, if you have an example of what these 4 in conjunction look like, what are they doing from an orchestration perspective?
So we do have UIs for all these apps where we at American Eagle have kind of an optimization team or a part of our supply chain intelligence team who is continually monitoring the outputs of the apps, there are some user settings and configurations that are configurable within the apps. For example, maybe you have some business requirement to force a particular SKU not to be eligible in a warehouse, things like that. We always want the humans to have the final say. But for the most part, they're very low touch. They mostly just run on an automated schedule in the background and produce the outputs that feed directly into our systems. Like, for example, we use Bamboo Rows for our to manage all of our inbound. So all the incoming cartons will be reallocated, redirected based on the outputs of the app. But the app kind of sits on top of those operational systems and just feeds it to them.
Okay. Now, diving deeper onto each of this, the forecasting app. Do you have any metric on how much it has improved your forecasts for either American Eagles or your retail partners, or retail customers, I should say?
For American Eagle, off the top of my head, I don't know what our accuracy improvement has been. We were using, I think we were just using whatever the kind of inbuilt demand forecasting from Blue Yonder is before we went towards this more machine learning forecast approach. I don't know off the top of my head what the improvement there was, but I know for our customers, for the most part, they don't have forecasts at all at the product level. So we've been able to improve from no accuracy at all to quite accurate. So that has been an improvement. And then even for the ones that do already have a forecast, we've been able to show fairly significant improvement over their baseline.
Pretty cool. You operate in an industry where, new product introductions are basically what drives the industry. Maybe that's fair to say. How do you think about, it's one thing that you have a very established long line of products that are just living there forever and it's very easy to forecast, but you're dealing literally with new introductions all the time. How do you think about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. This is one of the biggest challenges of forecasting for a fashion business or a health and beauty business that do introduce new SKUs every season, every couple of months, even every couple of weeks. So it's the way we've essentially solved that problem, and we're happy to have been able to offer this to a couple of our quiet clients as well, is there's essentially a step before the forecasting, which is more or less a clustering model that looks at the new products. It takes in product attribute information, and it's able to associate them with products where we do have history or with products that had history in the past, and start that as a baseline forecast. And then as soon as we do start selling, we're able to immediately update that forecast using that product's actual sales history. So this kind of clustering algorithm has been really useful for dealing with new products.
And what about again, in your industry, there's a very stochastic, random demand almost. And I guess this is where the other three apps come into play as well, right? Where, okay, you detect that some peak in randomness. How do you think about that stochastic demand, basically?
So that's a great question. No forecast is accurate. So that is a strong belief of mine and also just a mathematical truth. We don't actually have any way to predict the future with perfect accuracy. So you have to build in some buffers into the system, which is where traditional methods from supply chain optimization come into play. Stochastic safety stock type of models, probabilistic forecasts, where you're not just forecasting kind of that mean point forecast, like on average what it'll be, but let's say you really want to guarantee 90% coverage, 90% service level, then you can use more of like a probabilistic approach to ensure that you have that coverage. But of course, there's always the trade-off between cost and additional inventory. For example, if you're trying to keep a high service level at your retail stores, there's the cost of allocating the inventory to those stores versus the risk of a lost sale. So it's about that cost trade-off and that optimization as well.
You kind of like lead me into my next line of questions on assortment, right? All about stockouts, all about lost sales, all about placing inventory in a particular warehouse or in a particular store, right? So how does this assortment app actually improve inventory placement? How much has it avoided stockouts? How much has it avoided lost sales? Anything you can share with us about that?
Yep, absolutely. So in our business, there is and I think probably a lot of other consumer good business, there's a huge sort of substitute and complement effect that we want to take into account. So when a customer goes on the American Eagle website and she's buying a bikini top, it's very likely she's buying the bikini bottom as well in some sort of correlated size. But even things less straightforward than that, a lot of customers go in, they buy jeans and shorts at the same time, which maybe you don't automatically think would be true. So a lot of that kind of affinity analysis or that to use like economics terms, like those complements, comes into play with the assortment app, because we want to make sure that items that are often bought together will be stocked together so that they can ship together. And then in terms of the metrics improvements we've been seeing, so I was taking a look at the data earlier today. It looks like between 2020 to 2024, we were able to reduce our shipments per order from about 1.2 to under 1.1, which for people not really in the weeds of supply chain may sound not very impressive, but 0.01 reduction in shipments per order translates to something like $1 million of savings for American Eagle. So it's actually huge when we're able to reduce the shipments per order and decrease those delivery costs.
I'm always fascinated by companies that are obsessed with the very granular unit economics. We interviewed Jacques Levis from UPS months ago. He was chatting with us about how UPS measures how like each second that a driver is on the road, how much that costs UPS, and each mile, and right how it translates into potential savings. So, yeah, for me in this brave new world, companies that are not obsessed with the very granular measurement of how much a unit of time, of unit of costs is, we're not going to make it, frankly speaking.
Totally agree. Yep, that's what it's all about in supply chain.
Now, all right, wrapping it up, right? Like dynamic carton routing, you now figured out, all right, this is my demand forecast, and this is roughly where I need to place my inventory thanks to this assortment app, right? And the idea there being, I would assume, is try to bring the inventory as close as possible to the end consumer so that you'll save less on transportation, right? Because it's just there for them. Then the dynamic carton happens, or dynamic routing happens when there is, I guess, deviations from the plan, or when does this actually kick in?
So this has a lot to do with, honestly, just kind of optimizing the cartons, which are packed in a certain amount of units per carton, to the location. So we're just trying to minimize the deviation between what our target is, the target as determined by forecast and assortment, versus what is actually physically possible to do in the real world based on like the carton unit quantities. And then we are also working on kind of upstream optimizing how we pack those cartons at the vendor to better support being able to really achieve our target inventory at the warehouses without having to, for example, send one big carton to one location and then use the transfers app to kind of break it and distribute it across the network.
Pretty cool stuff. To wrap up this line of questioning, is any other figures, estimates that you can provide on savings or increases in service levels that you've seen with these initiatives?
I don't have too many great specific numbers. I know I said we've reduced shipments per order from 1.2 to less than 1.1. I think we've reduced average miles per package by something like 100 miles. In terms of service level, I don't have specific figures to quote, but I know that our estimated delivery times for customers has decreased as well. And we're also able on the website to provide pretty accurate estimated delivery times, which is not actually a supply chain initiative that came from the website team, but I still think that they did a great job there. But yeah, it's all about just having the inventory in the right place at the right time to be able to get it as quick as possible to the customer, which is what these apps do and what we've really been able to achieve.
Basically, AI or any model really is only as good as the data it is trained on. How do you think about this process of data gathering, data cleanup, and, frankly, digitization for these type of old industry companies?
I think it's the number one most important thing out there. It's the least glamorous thing. It's the thing people just don't want to put in the time and money or mental energy for, but it is so very vital and key. American Eagle, I might be a bit biased, but I think we kind of lead our industry in early adopting of technology, and we have put all of our data in our cloud data warehouse quite a while ago. But even now, there's still a lot of opportunities to digitalize essentially processes, very manual processes or information that lives inside people's head that have just been working at the company for 20 years. Different things that just happen via email or just in Excel. There's so much amazing data and information that still needs to be digitalized. And we have found many, many instances where there's nothing we can do from a modeling standpoint to improve our model results. We just have to get better data. We have to get more data. That we've seen that come up all the time. So super important, not super glamorous, but super necessary.
Super necessary. And I mean, one thing is struggling with your internal company and trying to, clean that up. But now you're also struggling with your customers' data, right? Do you see a big difference in the level of data upkeep and maintenance that different companies have? How what are you seeing there?
Definitely, there's a wide range. I mean, American Eagle has certainly room to improve, but I see that when I see what other companies are doing, although they're much smaller and a lot of times newer companies, I still am quite impressed with what we've been able to achieve. But yeah, there's all sorts. There's quite a range of data that is even possible to get at, let alone clean or usable or accurate or complete. That's definitely a challenge.
Now, talking of what you've been able to achieve, let's talk about change management. In a way, I think that just as hard as the math is, change management might be equally hard, if not more hard, harder, right, than the math itself. So, first off, what are some challenges that you've faced in trying to implement some of these AI initiatives and some of these algorithmic decisions, automated decisions, etc.? What are some challenges there?
So I think one challenge with change management is always that you don't want to come across as threatening someone's job, either by saying you're going to replace them or that you are better than them or that you know more than them, because in 99 out of 100 cases, you don't. You know less than them about what their job is and what they're trying to achieve. So some amount of humility is very important in these conversations. It is probably true that my team, we know more about the AI and the algorithms and a lot of the how to use the data, but the data itself, we may not know a lot about the KPIs that are important, as well as just the day-to-day processes. So that is always very important. I do see people making the mistake of getting a little bit of information and then immediately thinking of an AI model that can solve the problem they think they heard, but not realizing that there's so much that they don't know about the business and about what the problem actually is. So that's always key. And then I do think, in my experience, I think I can honestly say I don't think I've ever automated away someone's job. I think I've only ever created tools that can empower someone to do their job in a way that they actually would want to do it if they could ideally dream of how they wanted to be doing their job, never to replace the human element. So as long as you can build relationships and rapport and trust and realize that you are not always the smartest person in the room and probably you don't want to be, then that I think has served me well in the past.
So much to unpack there. First, how do you make it so that someone actually sees this and says, oh, wow, I definitely want to use this because whatever, right? How do you make that happen?
That's difficult. People do like to do what they're used to. There's a certain amount of comfort in the familiar. So you really have to meet people where they're at. I think it does help to get a really good understanding of both what problems they're trying to solve and what ideally they would do if they had the tools to do it, and try to build towards that, while also helping to expand their imagination if there truly is a better way to approach the problem that might be radically different from what they're doing. It's difficult though, it's difficult to make people want to change and to learn new things if they don't fully buy into it. So it's your job to kind of sell it to them and make sure that they trust you and they trust the solution.
Yeah, and it also has something to do with incentives and measuring things differently. And yeah, human nature is, change management. Again, it's as hard, if not more, harder than the models themselves. You also did say you've never built an algorithmic decision model, right? That replaces a human being. So I guess I know the answer to this one, right? But your take on, is AI coming for our jobs?
I don't think so. At least I hope not. I don't think that would be the right direction for American Eagle or any other company. I think there is a special human touch to whether it's supply chain or the design of clothing or the planning of the store layout or the planning of the website layout. At the end of the day, I think AI is an amazing tool that we should not be afraid of, but I don't think it's realistic or even optimistic to say that AI would replace all of our jobs. I think there's always going to be a place for people in retail, at fashion retail, and probably other industries as well.
You mentioned in another interview recently that something that excites you about the future is that soon you do believe that you won't have to be a data scientist to use AI to make supply chain decisions. Do you still believe that? Are you still excited about that?
Yeah, exactly. And that's a great example of what we were just talking about, because I don't want, for example, the merchants who are trying to determine what styles we should buy for the upcoming season. I don't want that job to be automated away by AI. I want those people to be able to easily look at historical styles that share characteristics in common and create a projection of how those might perform based on trend analysis of trends going on in the market right now. I don't want to only repeat the past. I want the human ingenuity and creativity about how we design our business to be the final say and to be what sets American Eagle apart from another business. If all of our companies are just using AI models to make decisions, we're not going to end up with a great variety of beautiful clothing. We're going to end up with more of the same, and I think we'll all get quite bored of that. So I just hope that we can empower more people in the business with data and with AI, and not necessarily require data scientists to be building custom solutions for every question and problem that they have. But every question and problem that they have could be solved potentially by data and AI if we can kind of put those tools into their hands.
Very, very cool. It's like this paradigm where I have a problem in front of me. The first thing that I turn to solve the problem is some AI that I can control and use for my scope of work, right? But still, taste is king and queen, right? However you define taste, right? Where, hey, if not, we will all, wear great t-shirts. What else excites you about the future in terms of, the technologies and the things that you're seeing in the field?
Honestly, I mean, it is not a glamorous answer, but I'm very excited with the renewed energy in developing a robust data layer, digitalizing data from all parts of the business. This is very important if you do want to use generative AI and some of these new advanced technologies, because you do need relatively clean, robust, complete, accurate, and fairly well-documented data to support these, which is my dream. I would love the data to kind of meet all those criteria. And it sounds like it seems to me what I'm seeing is kind of a renewed interest and excitement and investment in making this a reality. So that doesn't sound very glamorous, most likely, but I think that will superpower and supercharge any other AI related initiative that you might be interested in pursuing.
Last couple of questions that I enjoy asking everyone in this podcast. First one is, what's your favorite optimization story or optimization algorithm that you've ever seen in your life?
Okay, so this is back to from when I was in school, but it is something that is dear to my heart. So my friends and I in school, for one of our projects, developed a little fake company called Wander World, where we optimized budget travelers to travel the world. So we ourselves were budget travelers back in grad school, and we wanted to create a solution where you didn't really care where you went. You didn't really care necessarily how long you were there. You just were on a budget and you wanted to see the world. So that was Wander World. And, we scraped data from like airline APIs and put in our budgets and a couple of preferences, and it kind of created an optimal travel route for us. And we actually used it to plan a trip to Europe, and we went to Barcelona, Mallorca, and London. And so that was really fun for us.
Pretty cool. I love that use case. Last question. People working in supply chain, people trying to optimize their supply chains, people trying to adopt some of these algorithmic approaches. What is one strategy that you would recommend to supply chain leaders to make their operations more efficient? However you want to answer that.
I won't harp too much more on a robust data layer, because I think I've hit on that a few times, although that probably would be my real answer. But in a similar vein, I would say, if you are excited about AI and how it can transform your business, there is a whole world of very tried and true AI solutions out there, not just generative AI. So I'm not a generative AI hater. I just think that it is a hammer and not every problem is a nail. And there's a ton out there that can be improved upon through statistical models, mathematical optimization, and some machine learning and analytical models as well. So you can certainly ask ChatGPT to tell you about those type of models. So you can use generative AI for that use case. But there's a ton of problems out there that you want to think of what the simple solution is, because you always want to trade off between simple and intelligent and effective, and not get yourself bogged down with trying to just go for what's complex and what's fancy to solve problems that may not need that.
Yeah, great answer. It's like this thing where CEOs all over the world tell their teams, hey, we need to use AI. whatever that means, right? It's so we're certainly living in
It
that
is
kind of
it's an
world
umbrella
right now.
term. Exactly.
Full circle. Gabriella, thank you so much for being here with us, for taking the time. Really enjoyed the conversation here.
Me too. Thanks so much for having me, Diego. It was really fun to be here.
That's a wrap on today's deep dive with supply chain optimizers. If you found value in our controversial tactics and data-driven stories, don't forget to hit follow and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Have a burning question or want to share your own optimization success? Connect with me, Diego Solorzano, on LinkedIn, or for more information on how we can help you transform your supply chain and logistics operations, visit thesteya.com. Thanks for listening.